Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to a surprise episode of the Best Phone Plans Podcast, aka Best Phone Plans with Dennis. But tonight we have a special guest. It's the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sneed Mobile Tech.
What's up, Dennis?
Not too much, man. Happy to have you on.
Thanks.
I just want to give a frontal shout out for what the game plan is for tonight. It's kind of a marathon session. Tonight we're going to be doing a little show on my channel, and then right afterwards we're going to be going to Sneed's channel, and I'll let you know on more details on what will be discussed at the end of the show. With that being said, let's get into the main topic. It's one that I'm sad that I couldn't be there for on your channel, which is the state of 5G in the US based off of Rootmetrics. Before we actually look at the hard documentation, Sneed, I want to ask your upfront opinion as someone that has done a significant amount of testing throughout the greater Ohio area. What are your thoughts on 5G? Has it delivered on the promises that it was supposed to bring?
No, it has not delivered on the promises. It's the promises have been lofty, like the bar that I would say that the mobile network operators have set. They kind of put a target on their backs, I suppose. They told us we would have, X amount of downlink speed. They told us we would have X amount of uplink speed. They told us we would have X latency. And we really haven't seen any of it to the degree that they said we would up to this point. I applaud, the setting high goals. A standard of excellence is important, but we're not even really approaching what we thought we would get. So if I'm going to shoot straight from point A to now being point B, we have improved greatly from the launch of 5G till today. Right? So it has improved and it has gotten better, but there's no version of those initial promises that have been fulfilled up to this point. From a latency standpoint, from just a throughput capacity standpoint, it hasn't been there. And it's been oversold and they've under-delivered. And it's one of those things where, you make your bed and you lie in it. And that was the carriers that decided to do it. They oversold, and so thus far they've under-delivered.
I 100% agree on your synopsis of the current state of affairs. The only minor caveat or minor critique I would say is that while 5G did not even come close to the imaginary dreams that were shown on pretty PowerPoints and presentations, when 5G is done well, or this flavor of 5G that we get, it does make a dramatic impact and improvements for certain networks, specifically the one in question, in my mind, is Verizon, because they were the most spectrum starved out of the three carriers. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get up the report. So I'm bringing that up right now on my handy dandy screen. And here we go. So this here is the state of the 5G Rootmetrics report, a product of Ookla, an Ookla company, because Ookla bought Rootmetrics. And Ookla and Rootmetrics do tons of testing year-round. They'll have people driving around doing different paths, as well as collecting crowdsourced data as well, I believe. This month, they did a high-level overview of the first 60 cities for the first half of 2022 out of 125 PEAs. And the summary results that they found was that this half of the year, T-Mobile provided the best 5G experience overall, with overall 5G availability and overall speed or capacity. And Verizon won the reliability award. Do you agree with that sentiment based off your testing and your PEA?
For the most part, Dennis, it's mostly accurate. I'd say that, reliability is an important networking element. I'm glad that they at least consider that in their evaluation. Maybe it should be more heavily weighted, but I think the way that a lot of these testing firms evaluate the overall networking is based on availability. They prioritize. So like availability is number one, and then reliability is number two. because at this point in the game, it's just quantifying. It's just trying to get as much 5G as possible. A conversation 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're not going to be talking about like availability of 5G. AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile will have essentially the same amount of pops covered in mid-band 5G or whatever, which there's nothing really to glorify about low-band 5G. Millimeter wave is going to be a long, grueling task. Maybe we start to quantify that in like 5 years. I don't know. But like when it comes to like mid-band pops covered, right now it's about availability. And then I feel like reliability comes in second for the importance of the evaluation piece. And maybe that's wrong. I guess it depends who you ask. Having a lot of 5G, but if it's not performing well, maybe kind of like, well, what's the point? What are we celebrating here if it's not very good, right? So if it's problematic or if it drops frequently or you have disconnects to the data sessions, and those sort of things, I'm glad that they include some of that in this evaluation, right? But for the most part, I feel like this is accurate. In my PA, I think I connect to T-Mobile's 5G probably twice as much as Verizon's and probably 3 times as much as AT&T's. So to me, I feel it's fairly accurate in that respect. And then Verizon having the most reliable 5G, that is 100% the case here in Cleveland as a market. So it lines up with what I've seen, and it lines up with what I've seen in Ohio too, as a state. I've tested a little bit in PA and Michigan. I feel it's pretty accurate. The one thing I would like to see more of is now that we're in the second, I guess we got to say this is our first full half where T-Mobile's competitors now have a legitimate mid-band 5G network. Seeing what happens in half 2 and then half 1 of next year, we could start comparing seeing how the gap starts to close and how competition kind of ramps up. So I feel it's accurate. I'm glad to see things are changing in the competitive landscape.
Yeah, I think you touched on so many points in your presentation of what you were talking about. One of which is how the results are impacted greatly by the testing that's being done. I know earlier this year there was some controversy over some tests that were ran by some other companies and firms and the results that they were able to draw. And there's something to be said about how metrics are being weighted and what's most important. Like me personally, Sneed, I would rate reliability as the most important metric, because what good is bars on my phone if I can't do anything with it, so to speak? And I would actually rate availability as honestly probably the least important of the metrics, because it will hear me out on this, okay? Having service is important. Like having bars on the phone is important. Having 5G service on my phone specifically is not important. I don't care if it's LTE, 5G, 3G, or whatever. If it lets me do what I want to do without issues, i.e. play YouTube at like at least 1080p with no buffering and Google Maps, Spotify, that kind of stuff, then I and your everyday consumer probably isn't going to care, right? So that's my standpoint on that piece. I will also just say that I'm actually a little bit surprised that that Verizon actually got the 5G reliability winnings, to be honest. And the reason for that is because the bulk of Verizon's 5G is DSS for the most part, for the most of their footprint. And I know C-band just recently went on, and that definitely did light up for like 100 million people. But I don't know necessarily if Verizon C-band came out of the gate like right on time as far as like reliability wise, like when it first went live. I know there was, at least for me personally, the initial 5G experience for a couple of weeks there after initial launch for certain towers in certain areas was similar to the low power experience that I had when I was over in Las Vegas with Carlos. I don't know if you had a similar experience with me with optimization and stuff, but I would imagine that during the time period of this testing that the C-band that me and you truly love today wouldn't have been that exact same experience. So I'm a little bit surprised that they actually won the reliability reward. Especially, too, because you would think that if you have speed and you have availability, then you should be winning the reliability, too, right? So
Yeah, you bring up some good points. The first thing I think that you brought up that's important is you as a cellular network, mobile network user, you don't look at it in a vacuum. You don't evaluate an overall network as the best 5G because you're connected to LT as well as 5G. These are multiple technologies, generations of technologies that work together. It's a portfolio approach. In fact, in the NSA form of 5G, I mean, what good is a poor 5G connection when the LTE can carry the load, right? So, I know who your favorite carrier is because they come through for you and they have a quality network, and none of it has to do with 5G. So I understand and I get what you're saying. It's an overall network experience. You don't care about the technology as long as it holds, right? And that's a valid approach. Now, this study specifically, Dennis, it is evaluating the 5G. So it's important that we frame the conversation one way or the other. Is this an overall networking discussion? Is this a 5G discussion, right? So now with that out of the way, we go back to what you mentioned about Verizon and reliability. Overall networking, I feel Verizon does a pretty nice job of reliability. When it comes to their 5G ultra wideband on the C-band N77 channel, I saw the same things you did. The first few weeks were rough. Sites were not properly functioning. They were being tuned, optimized, turned on. Sites are being upgraded. The density wasn't there. That impacts the overall experience within a region, right? So when you start to see clusters and tower sites handing off to one another, it changes the experience, right? And those same things I saw, Dennis. In fact, me and you are in PEAs where they have the same exact vendor, right? Verizon is using Samsung, and we've seen the growing pains of Samsung, and we've seen what the engineers that have been able to do up to this point. So I don't think it's the 5G UW that took this for Verizon reliability. I think it's just their standard of making sure that sites are properly functioning. The 5G UW offers capacity and throughput. That's preventing the lagging, the buffering, it's a boost to capacity. I personally think, Dennis, this specific metric or this quality here, this 5G reliability for Verizon says something more damning about their competition. For T-Mobile to have all that capacity and to have all that throughput and not have the reliability after having N41 live for 2 years, that kind of bothers me a little bit because they've had the time to allow it to flourish and to tune it and to master it and optimize it. So I'm shocked in that way, and that T-Mobile hasn't yet taken the reliability side. They're killing the speeds, they're killing the availability, but when I'll be most convinced about T-Mobile is when they take reliability, because that is their greatest hole in their game, in my opinion.
I 100% agree with you, especially because the simplified sentiment, although you and me know networking gets more complicated in this, but the simplified view of things is that if you have the capacity and you have the availability, then you should, in theory, be winning the reliability in the simplified view. Now, obviously, there's more complicated factors at play, like peering and routing of traffic and how the data is being managed in X, Y, and Z in the 11th. But in theory, this should have been an easy T-Mobile win. So that was a little bit surprising. But let's go ahead and scroll down. I don't want to beat around the bush too much. Rootmetrics actually does their own bit of a takeaway now that we've taken our takeaway. And they basically said that AT&T delivered great 5G reliability and provides, pretty good 5G availability overall. So kind of a blend. T-Mobile, as their synopsis said, basically won. It was their second consecutive best 5G prize, so that's cool on T-Mobile. I don't think that really shocks too many people based off how the testing is done and the outcome. And then Verizon apparently won 3 years in a row straight now for 5G reliability, which I wasn't aware that they actually won the past 2 awards. So I find that actually even more surprising, considering that if we're going 2 rewards back, C-band wouldn't have existed for them. So I think that one is basically what you touched on, Sneed, which is they had a great underlying network with their NSA, and the LT probably carried them from a reliability standpoint. And then as we scroll down a little bit further, we get to see by category, like the specific scores that we got out of the markets as far as who took fastest and whatnot. And we can see that Verizon, hands down, really, it wasn't even close for reliability. They took 95 of the markets, and T-Mobile had 100 markets of 5G availability. And there's more key takeaways. Is there anything else that's interesting on this? Maybe something like actual raw speeds would be great.
So there's a couple of interesting categories where it's like the bottom 5% performers and the top or the 95 percentile. So what those some of those metrics represent is how often is the network really slow, or how often is the network really bad. So then you can compare like which carrier is the least bad. I feel like that's important because some people sometimes, Dennis, they have to choose the least of the evils, right? All three networks struggle in some way, shape, or form. So your best option becomes the one that's the least problematic, right? Least dropped calls, least dropped data connections, least buffering, even though all of them do it on some level, right? So there it is, 5th percentile, worst case 5G download speeds. And no surprise there, you get the T-Mobile network, which has had the most time to build out their, ultra capacity layer. They have the least amount of 0 to 5 megabit testing. Like you could see, like they're very small. Look at the number of 5G markets, right? 125 out of 125, right? So not only do they have the availability piece, but if you look at the 30 plus megabit per second piece, right, they continue to flourish in those areas.
Yeah, so when I was looking at this too, what immediately caught my eye personally was that Verizon had an uptick of 11 markets, additional markets, where they were only getting between 0 and 5, which is what I would consider to be severe congestion. So Verizon had a severe uptick. AT&T had a small uptick, but then if we look at the next category, the 5 to 10 meg section, this is where Verizon has the majority of their markets sitting in between 5 and 10 meg, which I would still consider to be relatively congested. It's by definition, you can say it's usable, I suppose, for most things, but it's not the tremendous experience or the premium experience that Verizon likes to claim to have still in this modern day. T-Mobile, like you said, that ultra capacity really helped them. They had a reduction in areas where they were between 5 and 10, and the bulk of their markets now sit between that 10 to 30 threshold, which I would say is a pretty comfortable spot to be, because I think you and me both agreed that 25 meg will get you to do just about everything you'd want to do on a mobile network, on your phone specifically. And Verizon only had a singular market that had over 30 meg. I wonder which market that would have been. I'm gonna guess it was maybe New York.
It's possible. If you're gonna speculate, it's probably an area that has both millimeter wave and a top 46 PA with C-band, right? And I think that's the key. Is they've got areas of the country where they don't have N77 deployed, and some of those tower sites are probably a little long in the tooth, and they need upgrades, and I think that's what that indicates.
Yeah. On a side note, this is kind of cool. This shows us the markets in which highest 5G availability are for the carriers and fastest speeds, like what their fastest cities are. Fresno, California apparently has the most 5G available from AT&T at 98.6% of the market covered with them. McAllen, Texas for T-Mobile, which is honestly something I wasn't expecting, considering that Texas is kind of AT&T's playground. And Chicago, I'm also a little surprised by, because if I'm not mistaken, isn't the Windy City pretty good for AT&T and AT&T and T-Mobile? Excuse me.
Yeah, I would venture a guess that all carriers perform pretty well in Chicago. There's fiber everywhere. The infrastructure is in place. It's not hard to zone small cells. Upgrading tower sites doesn't take much, and the investment's heavy there. So it wouldn't shock me if all three were very competitive there.
Yeah. I'm also just going to say really quickly, I'm slightly surprised that at this point in the game, with how long in the tooth we are with N41 deployment, the fastest median download speed that we're seeing from T-Mobile is 410. Considering that we've reached the point now where they have a lot of markets where they have 140 megahertz of spectrum up on air, And they've been converting in some markets the band 26 onto band 2 and expanding that as well. I'm just a little bit surprised considering the type of performance we're seeing from 60 megahertz on Verizon's side and what 100 megahertz did for them, getting them well over a gig on their speed tests.
I think we're seeing two things there. I think we're seeing a need for more backhaul, a lot more sites getting that capacity increase, and I think tower density. I think you have to start exploring cell splits. You have to start looking at small cells and a tighter macro grid, and that'll change a lot of those things.
Agreed. Well, I want to pivot topics a little bit, still in the same trend, but I want to touch on something that is from my personal experience and for the audience that is here, the 48 beautiful eyeballs. Sneed, as you know, and I've talked to you about, you were a participant in my testing. I recently made a trip up to Canada.
Right. Yeah.
And on this trip, I went from Pittsburgh up I-79 onto I-90 and went over Rainbow Road into Canada. I asked you this question in private, but I'll ask you again just for the setup for this conversation. Which carrier do you think performed best on this trip?
I predicted it would be AT&T.
And you were correct. Sadly, it wasn't even close. It wasn't even a competition. AT&T far and away actually exceeding my hypothesis for the trip, exceeding my expectations. There wasn't a singular point where I dropped below 50 meg. That was the slowest speed fast that I got on AT&T during that trip.
Very nice.
I even saw some 5G Plus in the literal middle of nowhere out in a place called Mercer County. For anyone that's familiar with Pennsylvania, it was like a 10-mile stretch on the highway where there was just nothing and there was 5G Plus. Second best performer shouldn't shock anyone. It was Verizon. For most of the trip, they had band 13 and band 66, at least on the western side of Pennsylvania, going up 79. Once you got past Erie is when you started to see some of the more upgraded, modernized sites with like band 2, like N2 or N5 DSS. Not ultra wideband, just like, but more upgraded,
Those
right?
sites that were probably that were modernized in the last few years, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
However, unfortunately, and this really disappointed me with Verizon, and I feel like every time I do a trip, I have to say this, I saw the dreaded band 13 only site. And I saw something that was more shocking because I wasn't aware of the fact that this was an issue for Verizon. I spotted band 1366 sites that only had 50 meg backhaul.
Wow.
Yeah, I told you about this, right? I said it had 55 meg was the cap, and I said it had band 66. So I was absolutely shook.
Yeah.
Lastly, though, is T-Mobile. I don't want to say T-Mobile impressed me because it gives off two kind of words for them. And based off your sentiment, you agreed. However, I will say I was pleasantly surprised or happy to see that T-Mobile, for the first time since the merger, meaningfully improved their coverage. There wasn't a point where I was roaming on AT&T during the trip. I had native coverage the whole way through, which is a tremendous improvement for them considering where they were coming from. The reason I'm bringing this up as a transition is because we were talking about the state of 5G in the US, and I'm talking about my travels still in the US. But how do you think we actually compared to our brothers and sisters up north in Canada? Do you think that this was comparable performance?
I mean, their network situation is so different. They have a different type of country geography dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of build in a way that concentrates on their population, which is not so different than what we do here in our country. But the geographic space in which people are distributed is very different. And I think what you probably saw was the fact that they have very managed networks allows them to maintain very good capacity, like uniform across the usage of their network. I would estimate that you probably didn't see many slow speed tests from any of their roaming partners. And what's interesting is the roaming in America, like when someone comes here to roam, or when we see like American customers take their American phone somewhere and roam, they typically don't enjoy good speeds from, like, say, for example, Verizon's roaming partners, or say, for example, T-Mobile. Their roaming is free and included in a lot of instances, but the experience isn't great. I can tell you that AT&T has some pretty nice Mexico and Canada roaming. So I feel like your experience was probably really nice, being that you probably took your AT&T line on purpose, knowing that it was going to be a nice experience. So your experience was probably very similar to a native Canadian carrier experience.
Well, yes, it was actually arguably in a way better than a native Canadian carrier's experience, mainly because on prepaid, at least, not talking about postpaid, but prepaid wise, they cap their speeds at like 150 meg, kind of like how Visible caps 5G.
Yeah.
I was getting true uncapped unfettered access with the AT&T, which was tremendous. And since you touched on carriers real quick, I'll just quickly say Verizon sucks. Don't take them to travel. Half a gig is nothing. T-Mobile's 5 gigs is pretty nice, and they actually had better roaming than Verizon did. And AT&T was absolute GOAT status. But I'm talking about the networks themselves, and I just want to say Canada has a level of density that can't be achieved in the US. Like, their density is basically New York everywhere, essentially. Sneed. Like, they have towers up the wazoo. Performance is great. What I'm actually going to do here real quick is I decided to pull up the handy dandy cell mapper, and what I'm showing here is all cell sites that I connected to on Bell. So these are just cell sites that I connect to on Bell, so you can kind of see where I came in at from Buffalo. And you can see, look at all the bands, 2, 4, 5, 7, 12. We got some 13 in the mix. And we just keep going up this road, and it's just, look at the density, right? There's probably a cell site every, what is that? Maybe, is that even a mile, Sneed?
Yeah, it's pretty short distance there. Not much.
The density is insane. I mean, look at
pretty
how close
uniform.
It's
pretty uniform. Like, the spacing's pretty steady. Like, if you look, they're all pretty much systematically close.
I mean, and look at all these bands, dude. 2, 4, 5, 7, 12, 13, 17.
That means they're upgraded. As those bands became available and that spectrum was provided to the carriers, they upgraded.
It's
truly
wild.
Their NIMBY situation isn't really an issue?
I don't think so, man, because look, every single one of these sites, dude, is upgraded. Every single one.
I bet you their regulatory processes are pretty standard, pretty quick, brief, streamlined, and then they don't have NIMBY issues, I'd assume.
Yeah, and also someone reached out from the community because they saw I actually spotted 5G NR, and it was, I don't think it was on Bell. It might have been hold on, was it Rogers that I spotted on? Someone I spotted 5G NR on, and it showed up as like a little dot.
You know what I was gonna say? I'm just assuming this, and I could be wrong. I feel like maybe the Canadian public is a little bit better informed about cellular than I think the American public. There's a lot of general American public that still believe that we are connecting our cell tower, like our cellular networks, we connect by satellite. They're like, people still say things like that. Yeah, they do. And then people still say those crazy things about what 5G does and what it causes and all that. And we don't mean to be demonetized here, but these are some of the wackadoodles that we see here in our country. Do those things happen in Canada?
I feel like probably not.
I mean, I'm just thinking aloud here. Like, are they informed, or do we see some of the same madness and misinformation we see here?
Yeah, I think they're more informed. They don't have the Alex Jones of the world screaming that the tap water's turning the frog something that I can't say on the podcast. But
I feel like that matters. The general public perception matters because culturally and from a sociology standpoint, that can get in the way, and that could be part of the politics of, infrastructure and such.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I do. But ultimately, those people shouldn't really, I know this is messed up to say, but they really shouldn't have a voice in our infrastructure deployment, in my humble opinion. Like, the people that are making the decisions to deploy cell sites, right? They're people that actually went to school, understand the science, right? The people that are actually able to generally write up the very fancy 100-page documents that require all kinds of legal jargonese and everything else typically aren't going to be those people that are screaming at the world that, the 5G is giving them whatever. Here we go. Finally, these are some Band 66 sites that I spotted on 5G NR. So this is NR66. I was the first one to cite these. This is standalone NR66. To my knowledge, we don't have any of that in the U.S. at the moment. Correct? Not yet.
I think T-Mobile does it sometimes.
Well, I just wanted to tell you, man, the performance is awesome. Proper standalone with real capacity is meaningfully incredible. I think I was averaging roughly 3 to like 500 meg.
Wow. Did you get a look at the channel depth?
It was on an iPhone because of the AT&T situation, so like not really. The only reason those are mapped is because of the Verizon phone, which runs one speed test and throttles halfway through. So
let's check Spectrum Omega and let's see if maybe they have the Canadian carriers.
Do you want to pull that up? Because I know you're more of a whiz when it comes to that.
I'm curious because I've never inquired about Canada, man. Operator county ban. I don't think so, man.
While you're doing that, I'm actually trying to pull up my speed test app because I know for a fact that I have to have some things in my like results history or something. I posted them on
Canada.
Twitter.
Damn.
I posted them on Twitter before too. I know that for a fact. I'm just trying to see here if. No, that's right. When I run a speed test, it shows up as frickin' T-Mobile because of the roaming. That's annoying. Yeah. Let's see. When did I go to Canada? That was when. What was Friday? What date would that be? Help me, Sneed. Is that August 4th?
That would be August 5th.
August 5th. Shows up as 18. This is August 5th. Yeah, it shows up as... It just shows the long... This is the right spot, I think. But it shows up... Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is it, but it shows up as AT&T, which is annoying because it roams through AT&T, right? But that's a bad speed test for this. Let's see. Did it just not... Okay, here's a good speed test. So, like, this one is 260 down, 25 up.
260 by 25 on N66?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the ping was 35 milliseconds, despite being routed through U.S. traffic.
Interesting.
Which, by the way, is really good. Because, remember, it's not going through, like, Canadian carriers proper, right?
Okay.
There's other speed tests that I guess were slower than I remember. I don't know if I just never finish the test when I was doing up there, but it was super solid. I had another test that did finish that was 277 by 12.2. The ping time was a low of 78 with the average being 97. I don't know if that was N66 specifically because it's iPhone, right? But I just know that I was getting really good speeds on the downlink. Uplink was a little bit questionable, but I think that's due to the nature of AWS, right? It's mainly a download band, right?
Yeah.
But anywho, I don't know. Just wanted to show that. Thought it was kind of cool. Let's talk about the last thing, and then we can get ready. You can tell the audience about what's going on with your shows tonight, which is we talked about a lot of 5G tonight. We talked about our thoughts on the actual performance overall. What have the carriers actually been doing, though, with the excess availability? Have you been keeping up with it?
Here in America?
Yeah.
Well, T-Mobile and Verizon are monetizing through fixed wireless access. So they're taking, I suppose, the baloney scraps or, whatever extra residual excess capacity they have. And they're doing 5G home internet. And I think more so T-Mobile scaling it more and looking to monetize their network. It's all profit to them. It's no skin off their back whether or not people adopt to it. I think a lot of people are taking to it. It's unusual and strange. We're seeing so many cable customers leaving cable to go to fixed wireless access, specifically the T-Mobile variation. right? When we're looking at their numbers, they added like 560,000 subs, and many of them are coming from urban and suburban core, which is crazy. I think in rural, it's a lot easier to get a fixed wireless access customer, but they're still getting it in suburban too. And they're trying it, and if it's good enough, they'll keep it, and it's priced well, they'll try. So that's essentially what the excess capacity is going for between the two carriers, Verizon and T-Mobile. The AT&T not really doing fixed wireless. They do it, but they do it with dedicated spectrum that's not on their traditional mobile network. So it's like they set up external antennas and radio gear on your home, right? The traditional fixed wireless access way. Verizon and T-Mobile just kind of like, hey, you qualify, you can buy it. Here's a gateway, easy setup, a boom, boom, boom. You're using our mobile network and life is good.
Well, the reason I was asking is because we did just get some breaking news that T-Mobile has decided to become a little bit more cable-esque in nature, or maybe worse than cable, maybe more satellite inspired would be the wording, because they've come out with a light version of their product. Similar to light beer, it's flavorless and terrible. Meet and welcome T-Mobile Home Internet Lite. Steed, for $50 a month, you can get 100 gigs of high-speed data. How does that sound?
From a value standpoint, it sounds terrible.
Well, it's actually even more horrible than you think, and I'm sure we'll get into it more when we go onto your show later on tonight. But just for everyone that's a Best Phone Plans lover, you'll know that me and Stetson have talked about how T-Mobile has a $50 a month, 100 gig hotspot plan, which we actually think is tremendous value because it's a hotspot you can carry wherever you want. You can do your own thing. It's not bad. Mm-hmm. And in fact, AT&T specifically, I believe Cricket Prepaid has a similar plan, which is also pretty awesome. And then Verizon does some interesting things when it comes to discounts on their hotspots. But this isn't a hotspot plan. It's being targeted towards a home internet user, which is a totally different use case.
So it's worse than that. It's not even prioritized like a hotspot is, right? It's even worse. Yeah. And it's not technically mobile, right? So you lose, by definition, the mobility piece of taking it where you go and all of that. No, you could take it where you go. I don't think it'd be an issue. Like, people have done that and they've shown it, but it's for dire straits. This is literally for the desperate customer. I'll talk more about it on my show, but when it comes to value, at 50 bones for 100 gigs, there's no value there as a home internet replacement or even a competitor. It's not. But I could see, I'm serious, Dennis. I could see some people just being like, let me try it, let me see it. And man, Viasat sucks and HughesNet sucks. Like, those situations will arise, and I think that's really where that comes into play. And then there's other plans too, Dennis. We'll talk about which ones are better than others, like from this light version. I'm just here to tell you guys, like, this will never impress anyone. Nobody will be thrilled to have this service, but it's encouraging because I think it's a sign that T-Mobile wants to see where people want to use this.
Or it's a sign that they want to start monetizing two different ways like cable does, and or introduce data caps to have different price tiers.
So that's speculative, and I can respect that opinion. I was thinking like they want to know where to build their 5G sites.
No, I agree with that sentiment to some extent. However, I'm thinking about the capitalist, Dennis. I need different beanies that say capitalist and social. Dude, I need that to happen, but
will you switch beanies like mid conversation?
Yeah, kind of like how like there's like Waluigi and Luigi. I need like two different like beanies or something to represent that. If there's an artist out there, man, I would love to have some like cool stuff like that. But jokes aside, the capitalist in me doesn't have the best faith when it comes to corporations. I'm pretty negative when it comes to all telecom companies. They all get my ire in some wave or fashion for something. But before I don't want to get super deep in this. I want to save this for your show, but I just want to say something that's really important that and it's basically the crux to my biggest problem with what T-Mobile's doing, is that there are 4 issues when it comes to internet. All right, it's the big 4 A's: availability, affordability, accessibility, and this isn't an A, but reliability. Those are the big 4 things that need to be addressed in this country from an internet standpoint. T-Mobile addresses none of the above with this product. It's not affordable. Accessibility wise, it's not necessarily all that accessible. I mean, it's still somewhat limited, right? Like, not everyone can get it. It's a little bit more expandable, but not everyone can get it. So accessibility, it fails. Reliability is even more suspect because this is going to be going into places where T-Mobile's N41 ultra capacity isn't even as widely deployed, which is the reason why they're not apparently selling their normal traditional T-Mobile home internet. So reliability is suspect here. And affordability, and what was the 4th one I said? Availability, reliability.
I want to push back a little bit here.
Yeah.
The accessibility piece.
Accessibility. Yeah, that's the one. Hold up. Let me touch on that real quick. Accessibility, they fail because you still have to use their equipment, which I would argue is not good. Like this could have been good if they let you use whatever you want, so you could actually have like a router that actually gives you home internet replacement features. But you have to use their stuff, and considering this is going to be mainly primarily targeted at rural Americans, where signal is going to be suspect and questionable, you're definitely going to need better equipment, or maybe more unique equipment, to try to eke out the best possible signal in these rural settings to get great performance. Go ahead, then.
All right, good stuff, Dennis. Affordability, it's probably cheaper than anything else that's available to them. So I think you're wrong there. From a value standpoint, there's no value in this, right? 100 gigs, you are severely capped. So the cost may not even matter in that respect. You're like, oh, $50 for 100 gigs? What's the value in that? People are paying $50 for unlimited.
Sorry to cut you off, but I don't want to forget. There's a reason why I have an issue with affordability, and let me highlight this. 100 gigs is not, so we agree that the average internet user uses like 500 gigs, right? Like that's an agreed upon amount.
There are
average household.
Yeah, there's an estimated 23% of the U.S. population that uses 100 gigs or less.
I have an issue with that statistic because I want to know what the sample size was and who they were collecting it from. Because if it was the targeted demographic that they're trying to target, which is people that don't have access to broadband, then of course their data usage.
It makes sense that they have no usage, right?
Right.
Because they don't have good service.
Because there is a direct correlation. There's a statistical improvement, high correlation between increases in broadband and increases in data traffic in as a percentage. Like it lines up like perfectly.
Sure.
So
yeah.
So I have an issue with that. But the overall average for the U.S. is something like 500 gigs post-COVID. That's the average. Yeah. This is not enough for the average household to do whatever they please on it, which means they're still going to have to rely on whatever their crappy other option is, because this slows down to 2G speeds, which is definitively unusable. Even satellite providers don't throttle to 2G. They throttle you to like 5 meg or something like that. So you're going to still need to rely, like you're going to have to ration stuff. You're going to be like, okay, little Timmy, you want to load up Wikipedia? Use the DSL router now. And John, who wants to do his work from home on Zoom conference calls, will be using the better wireless internet, begging to God that like the Zoom conference calls don't go too long. He doesn't have an extra meeting, because 100 gigs is nothing for a month.
Yeah, like I was saying about the affordability piece, it's coming in at $50. That in and of itself is affordable. What you're getting for that $50 is not much. It's 100 gigs, so that sucks. There's higher tiers of data usage that you can get, but the price doubles and triples, and it's crazy, right? So no value, but that price point, that entry is affordable, I guess, technically, whatever. Accessibility, I mean, there is accessibility and there is availability. They're going to essentially allow this on any tower site, which is pretty daggone crazy and I think risky. But that's why I was thinking, if you offer it on every tower site, are you admittedly just asking beta testers, show us where there's interest? And then within X amount of months, we're going to send out a crew to do an upgrade. And then we can sell you the full product and charge you the full amount.
But
and then
that's
give
the
you little extra.
optimistic. That's the optimistic, Sneed. The full product is only $50. They're making more money having the data cap, and
Yeah, I know, but they can legitimately fit more people. So like this is only going to attract a couple people on a sector on best case scenario. If they upgrade a site with N41, they could probably put 10 to 20 users on each sector. So 10 to 20 users per month on 3 sectors on a tower site or more. You know, if it's rural America, I mean, mobile usage might be pretty low. You know, so like those tower sites might actually be, in my estimation, fixed wireless access points. Like the mobile usage might only be 10% of that tower's data consumption. 90% of it might be going to T-Mobile 5G home internet customers. It might play out like that on some sites. It might.
see, I want to actually, ironically enough, disagree. I actually think more people are going to take this than I wish would. So I think that T-Mobile will get a meaningful amount of subscribers because a lot of these areas, as we both agree, have very poor access to good internet. And the T-Mobile, even band 71 in a rural area, might get them a stable 30 meg.
This is going to have a serious churn rate. Like, no, there are going to be 100 people that try this. 90% of them or more will say this is the worst thing I've ever tried.
I don't
Even
know.
they knew the terms, right? They knew it was going to be $50. They knew it was going to give them 100 gigs. They knew they were getting bottom tier priority, and they will still be disappointed, which makes no sense.
I don't know,
Buy
Steve.
bologna, you buy bologna, expect bologna. To expect ribeye is clear signs of insanity. Does
I don't
not
know.
make any sense.
I don't know. So, thinking back to a younger version of myself who had dial-up still, and I remember specifically using my dad's BlackBerry that he had from work that had an unlimited 3G data plan and thinking that that was just absolutely popping because that 3G speed was basically as fast, if not faster than the dial-up connection. And remember, this is a BlackBerry. This is not a smartphone, right? Like we were talking like terrible experience to do anything with it, right? But like I was excited, right? In the same vein, if I have DSL 1.5 meg from Verizon, it's super unreliable, right? And I can get T-Mobile and get, like I said, roughly 30 meg. I feel like that's pretty reasonable for band 71. If I can get 30 meg, that 30 meg opens up a whole new world for me that I couldn't do on 1.5. Now I can actually load up a YouTube video for maybe classes or something like that, and I could do Zoom. I can access the internet in a civilized, modern way. Yes, it's limited. Yes, I'm gonna have to be paranoid, and yes, I'm gonna have to ration the crap out of those gigs. Like I can't just go chilling and watching Netflix all day. But I can see enough people that have been so in bad situations buying it. The problem is, the bigger problem that I have here is that you're being optimist saying that T-Mobile is going to upgrade. I want to play devil's advocate because companies are going to do whatever's the most profitable for them, like from like an ROI standpoint. I think T-Mobile's main purpose for this, besides seeing interest, they might upgrade a few areas. I think the bigger driver here was to diversify revenue streams so to get customers they might otherwise not. And I don't think they're necessarily going to upgrade every single rural site. Like if the rural site only covers 200 people, right? And those 200 people don't have options anyway, so they can get away with charging these prices that they couldn't do in a competitive market where cable and fiber exists. They might just let it ride and milk it, right? Like think about the favorite companies that we all love to talk about. Comcast, Spectrum, whatever, right? There are areas where they upgrade and you get great DOCSIS 3 and 3.1 and all that other fun stuff, right? You get your gig. Meanwhile, the same tier exists, call it Blast Internet, in some rural part of Pennsylvania where it might only be like 200 by 10 still, and they're charging $80 for that. Meanwhile, I can get $80 for gig over here, right? Like they don't go out there and upgrade it. Super rural. They just keep milking the profits for as long as possible. Look at Verizon. They still got band 13 only sites, right? Like band 13 has been around since what, 2011, 12, whenever they started their LTE build? Mm-hmm. Never been touched, right? Anywho, I've been keeping the show for too long. We got a Patreon stream to catch. I'm so thankful for you taking the time to come on my show. It's always a joy and a pleasure. I want to thank everyone in the audience for watching as well. If you want to continue to see more, we'll be doing a public stream on your channel for 8:30.
Yeah, about 8:40, 8:45. We'll do the YouTube side. We're going to just pretty much jump straight into the Patreon stream. So for all my Patreon supporters, meet us there. We'll be there on Patreon. The link is provided on the Patreon page. And then for those of you that want to be a part of the Patreon community and get access to more videos, extra content, support us, and get those live streams and exclusives, you guys can get that link from my channel. It'll be in any of my videos down in the description box if you want to join and support us.
But thank you all again, everyone. Make sure you thumbs this video before we leave, and feel free to hashtag this to a friend or family with your favorite clip from when we discuss things, and comment what you disagree or agree with. Peace for now, guys. See you later.